What if the next major global conflict didn't begin with a nuclear launch or a massive invasion, but with a single missile fired silently from the Persian Gulf, shutting down global trade in minutes and pulling the world's most powerful military into a war it cannot easily escape? What if the weapons that could trigger that moment are already deployed, hidden in plain sight, and designed specifically to exploit America's greatest strengths? Tonight, we're not talking about speculation or science fiction. We're talking about real Iranian weapons that U.S. defense planners quietly take very seriously, because in a Gulf conflict, even one mistake could reshape the global order overnight. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. The Persian Gulf is one of the most militarized and strategically sensitive regions on Earth. A narrow stretch of water bordered by rival powers, packed with energy infrastructure and crossed daily by ships carrying nearly a fifth of the world's oil. For decades, the United States has maintained a dominant naval and air presence here, believing it could deter or defeat any regional threat. But Iran has spent years studying that dominance, identifying its vulnerabilities, and building weapons not to win a conventional war, but to make any war unbearably costly. This is not about overwhelming firepower. It's about denial, disruption, and psychological shock. And that is where the real danger begins. U.S. military intelligence assessments consistently highlight that Iran does not seek a traditional battlefield victory. Instead, Tehran's strategy is to make the Gulf ungovernable in wartime, to raise the price of intervention so high that political leaders hesitate, delay, or withdraw. This approach relies on weapons that are cheap compared to American systems, hard to detect, and designed to operate in swarms or layers. Every one of them serves a single purpose: to complicate U.S. decision-making in the opening hours of a conflict. And those opening hours, as history shows, often decide everything. One of the most closely watched elements of Iran's arsenal is its vast inventory of ballistic missiles. Unlike air forces that require air superiority and exposed runways, missiles can be launched quickly from mobile platforms and with limited warning. Iran's short and medium-range ballistic missiles are specifically designed to target U.S. bases, command centers, and logistics hubs throughout the Gulf. Even with advanced missile defenses, U.S. planners acknowledge that saturation attacks could overwhelm interceptors, forcing commanders to choose what to protect and what to risk losing. That dilemma alone changes the entire strategic equation before a single American aircraft leaves the ground. But missiles are only part of the picture. The real shock for many observers comes from how Iran has adapted asymmetric naval warfare for the modern era. The U.S. Navy is built around large, technologically advanced ships that dominate open waters. Iran counters this with hundreds of fast attack craft, small boats capable of high speed, armed with rockets, missiles, and torpedoes. Individually, they pose limited threat. Together, operating in swarms, they can flood radar screens, confuse targeting systems, and force U.S. commanders into split-second decisions where hesitation can be fatal. In the confined waters of the Gulf, that threat is magnified exponentially. Now pause for a moment and consider the psychological weight of that scenario. Imagine being responsible for a carrier strike group, knowing that a single miscalculation could lead to catastrophic loss of life, broadcast instantly across global media. That pressure is not theoretical. It's precisely what Iran's doctrine is designed to exploit. By creating constant uncertainty, Iran aims to control escalation without ever achieving traditional dominance. And that strategy has already reshaped how the U.S. thinks about naval operations in the region. Another weapon that commands serious attention in Washington is Iran's growing arsenal of land, attack, and anti-ship cruise missiles. These weapons fly low, follow terrain or sea, skimming paths, and are far harder to detect than ballistic missiles. Launch from shore, aircraft or ships They can threaten ports, airfields, and naval vessels with minimal warning. U.S. defense analysts note that even a limited number of successful strikes could disrupt reinforcement timelines, damage critical infrastructure, and create a perception of vulnerability that Iran would quickly exploit in information warfare. And information warfare is never far from the battlefield. Iran has demonstrated repeatedly that it understands how modern conflicts are fought not just with weapons, but with narratives. Every successful strike, every damaged ship, every temporarily closed shipping lane becomes a tool to amplify fear and doubt. U.S. leaders are acutely aware that public perception can constrain military options as effectively as enemy fire. That is why Iranian capabilities that generate dramatic visuals or economic disruption are often considered more dangerous than those that simply destroy targets. One of the most underestimated threats in the Gulf is Iran's extensive use of naval mines. These weapons are inexpensive, easy to deploy, and devastatingly effective in narrow waterways. Even the suspicion that mines are present can halt shipping, driving up insurance costs and triggering global market shocks. Clearing mines is slow, resource-intensive, and dangerous, requiring specialized vessels and crews. In a conflict, Iran would not need to sink dozens of ships. It would only need to create enough uncertainty to freeze maritime traffic and force the U.S. into a prolonged and politically costly cleanup operation. Now, here's the twist that often surprises audiences. Iran does not rely solely on its own forces to create these threats. It has spent decades building networks of allied groups and proxy forces across the region. These actors can operate with varying degrees of deniability, complicating attribution and response. From missile launches by aligned groups to drone attacks on infrastructure, the battlefield becomes diffuse and unpredictable. For U.S. planners, this means any Gulf conflict could rapidly expand beyond clear front lines, stretching resources and attention in multiple directions at once. Drones, in particular, have emerged as a critical component of Iran's military strategy. Once seen as the exclusive domain of advanced Western militaries, unmanned systems are now central to Iran's approach. Iranian drones are not always technologically superior, but they are numerous, adaptable, and increasingly precise. Used for surveillance, targeting, and direct attack, they can probe defenses continuously, identify weak points, and strike at moments of maximum impact. For U.S. forces, defending against persistent drone threats requires constant vigilance, draining manpower and resources even before a conflict officially begins. Consider the cumulative effect of all these systems operating together. Missiles threaten bases and ships, drones scout and harass, fast boats swarm, mines lurk unseen, proxies apply pressure across the region. None of these alone guarantees success against the United States, but together they form a layered challenge that erodes confidence, slows response, and increases the risk of escalation through miscalculation. This is why American defense officials rarely speak lightly about a potential Gulf conflict. They understand that superiority on paper does not always translate into control in practice. Another area of growing concern is Iran's investment in air defense systems. While not as advanced as those fielded by major powers, Iran's layered air defenses are designed to protect key assets and complicate strike planning by forcing U.S. aircraft to operate at greater distances or higher risk. These systems reduce sortie effectiveness and increase the time required to achieve objectives. In a fast-moving crisis, time is the most precious commodity of all. Every hour gained by Iran is an hour to shape the narrative, mobilize allies, and harden domestic resolve. The stakes of all this extend far beyond the region itself. A major conflict in the Gulf would reverberate through global energy markets, supply chains, and financial systems. Prices would spike. Markets would wobble. Political pressure would mount in capitals far removed from the battlefield. Iran's leadership understands this interconnectedness and sees it as leverage. By threatening the arteries of global commerce, Tehran can exert influence disproportionate to its conventional military power. That reality looms large in every U.S. contingency plan. There is also the human dimension, often lost in discussions of hardware and strategy. Tens of thousands of service members operate in and around the Gulf, living with the knowledge that they could be on the front lines of a conflict shaped by these weapons. Their families watch developments closely, knowing that escalation could come with little warning. Civilian populations across the region would bear the immediate consequences of disrupted infrastructure and economic shock. These human stakes are precisely why miscalculation is so dangerous and why restraint and signaling play such critical roles. As tensions rise and fall, both sides engage in a delicate dance of deterrence. Exercises are conducted, weapons are tested, statements are issued. Each move is scrutinized for intent and capability. When Iran unveils a new missile or drone, U.S. analysts dissect its range, payload, and guidance systems, not because they expect immediate use, but because understanding capability shapes response. In this environment, perception can be as powerful as reality. A weapon believed to be effective can alter behavior, even if it is never fired. What makes the current moment particularly volatile is the speed of modern warfare. Decisions that once took days now take minutes. Automated systems, rapid communication, and social media compress timelines dramatically. In such a setting, the margin for error shrinks. A radar contact misidentified, a drone flight misinterpreted, a missile test misread as an attack. These are not abstract concerns. They are scenarios war-gamed repeatedly by military planners who know how quickly crises can spiral. And yet, despite all these dangers, open conflict has been avoided time and again. This speaks to the enduring power of deterrence, but also to its fragility. Deterrence relies on rational actors, clear communication, and mutual understanding of consequences. The more complex and crowded the battlefield becomes, the harder it is to maintain that clarity. Iranian weapons that blur lines, operate in gray zones, or enable deniable actions strain deterrence to its limits. That is why they command such serious attention in U.S. defense circles. As viewers, it's easy to focus on the spectacle of advanced weapons and dramatic scenarios. But the real story lies in the quiet calculations happening behind closed doors. Analysts running simulations, commanders weighing risks, diplomats working to keep channels open even as rhetoric hardens. Every Iranian system discussed tonight is not just a piece of hardware, but a variable in an equation that determines whether peace holds or collapses. So when headlines talk about tensions in the Gulf, understand that beneath those words lies a complex web of strategy and counterstrategy. The weapons Iran fields are not designed for headlines. They are designed to force hesitation, to exploit geography, and to challenge assumptions. The United States takes them seriously not because they guarantee defeat, but because they guarantee uncertainty. And in the realm of military strategy, uncertainty is often the most dangerous weapon of all. As global dynamics continue to shift, staying informed becomes more important than ever. These systems will evolve, countermeasures will advance, new technologies will emerge. But the fundamental logic of deterrence and disruption will remain. Watching how these capabilities develop offers critical insight into where the world may be headed and how close it may come to the edge. The Gulf remains a flashpoint not because war is inevitable, but because the consequences of war are so immense. Every deployment, every test, every statement adds another layer to an already volatile mix. Understanding the weapons involved is not about fear, it's about awareness. And awareness is the first line of defense against surprise. As you reflect on what you've heard tonight, remember that the most significant battles are often fought long before the first shot is fired. They are fought in planning rooms, intelligence assessments, and strategic choices made under immense pressure. The weapons we've discussed shape those choices every day. Stay alert, stay informed, and stay with us as we continue to track the developments that could define the next chapter of global security. Because in a world this interconnected, what happens in the Gulf does not stay in the Gulf.